Thank you for downloading this podcast from Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk. For more podcasts and more information on your number one news and talk station, please visit 702.co.za or capetalk.co.za.
Stand up for the law. Stand up for decency. Stand up for compassion. Stand up for respect. Stand up for your community. Stand up for your future. Stand up for South Africa. LeadSA.co.za.
Very good morning to you. If you've just joined us, it is Saturday, the 24th of September, 5 minutes past 6. Welcome to Early Morning Breakfast. My name is Errol and I'm with you for another 55 minutes or so. This is our Health and Wellbeing Hour, and this is where we have experts in the studio or on the line talking about various topics. And this morning, I am very happy to welcome in studio two very special guests in order. First, ladies first. That's Dr Cherie Daly. Hello, Cherie. Good morning. Thank you for your time. And with us also is Louis Rehrl, who is in studio as well. Morning, Louis.
Morning.
Thank you. Just want to pull the microphone a bit towards you so people can hear what you have to. There you go.
Right.
Okay.
Morning.
Now, this morning we're going to be talking about a topic that we have touched on once or twice over the years that I've been doing this, but never really got into it in a big way. Just by way of introduction, Dr. Cherie Daly is Head of Medical Affairs in Europe and Asia for a company called Cryo-Save. Cryo-Save is the largest private stem cell bank in Europe and has a presence in over 40 countries worldwide. And we're going to be finding out about the facts surrounding cloning, embryonic stem cells, and the benefits of private and public banking. Now, Cherie Daly is a qualified medical practitioner. She's worked all over Africa, Middle East, Asia, and particularly in Europe. You're currently in Europe, in fact. You're based in Brussels.
I'm based in Antwerp.
In Antwerp, okay.
Yes.
Different living, hey?
Yes, very different. After 10 years in Asia and the Middle East, the winter has taken us by surprise.
Yes. All right. And your passion is to provide accurate education for both healthcare professionals and parents, and to ensure that all expectant parents have the necessary tools to enable an educated choice when it comes to their options regarding their child's cord blood. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'm sure by the end of the hour it will. And with us in studio also, as I mentioned earlier, is Louis Rehrl, and Louis is MD of the South African branch of Cryo-Save. Is that right, Louis?
That's correct, yep.
Okay. So it's a worldwide organization.
Yes, that's correct.
Can we start off at the beginning? And the numbers to dial are 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567. You can SMS on 31702 or 31567. The whole story of stem cells, I mean, it's one of the most exciting areas of medicine today, isn't it? I was listening yesterday. They had an insert on Sky about stem cells being used for overcoming deafness in young children.
Yes, correct.
So you can do all kinds of things, from growing limbs to growing, I don't know is there anything you can't grow?
In the laboratory, they're growing many things. When it comes to actually being done in humans, we're still a way away from this with what we call growing limbs and replacing it, and that has some way to go.
Yes.
But there is a lot of current work done for current applications, but endless potential. I think we still have a long way to go in a lot of fields in stem cells. There's a lot of fields that are quite advanced already. Bone marrow transplants, stem cell transplants using stem cells from the bone marrow are probably the oldest and the most well known to most people out there, and have been around for about 40 years. Following this therapy for blood, mainly blood cancers and blood-related diseases that have been treated with bone marrow over 40 years. The stem cells from the umbilical cord blood were introduced as an alternative to this about 20 years ago, when the first transplant was done in Paris with Professor Eliane Gluckman in 1988. And since then, transplant physicians now treating children and adults with blood or blood disorders have 3 potential sources of stem cells that they can use to treat these patients. And these are from the traditional bone marrow, from peripheral blood, and now from the umbilical cord stem cells that we can obtain at birth.
Now, is that what you're talking about, the cord blood cell? Is that what you mean?
Correct.
So it's actually the umbilical cord.
It's the umbilical cord. So once the baby has been delivered and the umbilical cord has been clamped and cut, and the baby has safely been handed to either the midwife or the father or the pediatrician, it's then that we collect the blood from the umbilical cord. So there's no interfering with the birthing procedure, and this cord blood can be collected. And we always say there are 3 options in some countries. In some countries, unfortunately, 2 options. The 3 options are: you can throw your umbilical cord blood away, like most people have done to date. You can donate it to a public bank if you are delivering in a country that supports public banking. Now, most public banks are supported by government funding, and you donate your cord blood to these banks, and it gets tissue typed. Mm-hmm. So we require that the tissue type is done, and it's put on an international donor registry, so that anyone requiring these stem cells for the treatment of these kind of blood or blood disorders can simultaneously, when searching international bone marrow donor registries, search international cord blood registries. And then, of course, the third option is that you can store this privately with a company like Cryo-Save, where you as parents pay us to process your cord blood and store it for you. This is not tissue typed, and this is for either your child or potentially a sibling, or even potentially a parent that can use this cord blood for treatment if they are a tissue match.
Okay. Louis, you're the South African CEO. Is there much awareness in South Africa of the whole issue, or is it still very much in the early stages where a lot of education has to be done?
Absolutely. That's one of our key problems. If you look at the greater population, awareness is very low. Awareness is building, and people are starting to find out of it. It's coming in the media. It's becoming a bit of a buzzword. But one of our key problems is the lack of education and awareness, because this opens the door then for all these other little things to creep in, like the controversial embryo, the embryonic stem cells. So that's part of what we do, is make sure that people are getting the right information, making the decision for the right reasons, and then making the choice accurately. We don't want people to be doing this to think that this is a magic bullet for everything, because it's important they do it for the right reason.
I was reading up on this last night, and I was reading some comment about the interference from an ethic point of view of the embryo and possible death of the... I mean, how does this work? Is this a real concern?
Absolutely, but Cherie's probably the best person to talk to you about the embryonic form of stem cells.
You know, there's different types of stem cells, so maybe if we can explain to our listeners that we can get, because stem cells are building blocks, from the minute that the embryo is fertilized in the womb and our body starts developing, it's from a ball of stem cells, and these stem cells build all our tissues today as we sit here. And then as you and I sit here today, we still have stem cells circulating through our body. And the natural capability of the stem cells is to go and build and repair. So we can get stem cells from the embryo, we can get it from the fetus, we can get it from the umbilical cord blood when the baby's born. And then later from adults, we can get it from the fat tissue and the bone marrow. So embryonic stem cells themselves carry with them quite a bit of controversy, because you would have to abort the fetus to obtain the stem cells. There's one company now that claims they can do it without aborting the fetus to obtain this. But there are a lot of ethical issues that go together with this. What also goes together with embryonic stem cells is, because they are such primitive stem cells, we don't know yet how to really control these, and whether these stem cells themselves in the body won't develop cancers themselves. So in my opinion, embryonic stem cells are an excellent research tool, but not something for therapy today. However, said that, the first inhuman clinical trial for embryonic stem cells has been launched this year, with only one patient being enrolled. Now, clinical therapy in human trials using adult stem cells from umbilical cord blood, from bone marrow, from fat tissue. There have been thousands and thousands of therapies using this.
Okay. Fascinating topic. I believe also that one can actually make stem cells. They're starting to make them. We'll get to that. We'll just go to the lines. Numbers to dial: 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567. You can SMS on 31702 or 31567. Heather in Buccleuch, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning. If somebody gets stem cells from a bank for whatever purpose, do they then get the donor of the stem cells DNA?
Yes, that's correct.
So if they committed a crime and they did a DNA to identify the perpetrator of the crime, would they pick up, say, my DNA?
No, they wouldn't do that. If they took some hair sample or skin sample to check your DNA and you'd received a stem cell transplant, they would still pick up your DNA and not the DNA of the donor from the stem cells you had.
Oh, okay. All right. Fine. Thank you.
All right, Heather.
Sure.
Thank you very much for the call. Some SMS says, how much does it cost to store the umbilical blood from Rehrl?
We have a few options at Cryo-Save. You can bank your baby's cord blood locally or internationally at our Belgium facility. If you're going to be doing that locally, it's only 12,800. Now, that's a one-off payment.
12,800 Rand, and you'll store it there for?
Well, the initial contract is a 20-year contract. Now, this is for a few reasons. The main being that, you remember, the cells are owned by the child. They are the child's own cells, and obviously the child's not of legal age to sign anything. So the parent signs on behalf of the child, and when the child reaches a legal age, they can take ownership of those cells. So the initial period is 20 years, but we'll store for as long as you'd like us to. These cells don't expire in storage.
Okay, and they're stored in what, frozen state?
Absolutely. So the process is quite simple. The healthcare practitioner will do the collection during birth. Afterwards, we'll collect that sample from the mother's bedside in the hospital, and we take it to our labs for processing. The process is obviously a very complex procedure, but then after that it's controlled rate frozen and stored in liquid nitrogen at minus 196 degrees. Now, it's left there undisturbed for the day that you might need it.
What is the if you can call it, a shelf life? Is it unlimited?
No, well, this is a new industry. So, as with anything, we
hasn't
have to...
been around long enough
yes,
to test yet.
We have to validate things.
Yes.
So, Broxmeyer, who's one of the godfathers of cord blood banking, has probably stored and used the oldest samples stored to date. So the oldest used sample has been a 15-year-old sample. But he recently published a paper in a medical journal showing that after 23 years, stem cells that have been cryopreserved from umbilical cord blood could be thawed and used. And when he thawed them, he showed that they were viable, not only viable, but they could engraft. That's what we want stem cells to do, engraft and form colonies. So as this industry grows, we will be able to validate longer ongoing storage. And as a company, we're 10 years old, so we continue to validate our samples that have been stored for 10 years.
Okay, lots of questions. Back after this.
The battle for the South commences as the Proteas take on the Aussies in 2 T20s, 3 ODIs and 2 tests. From October the 13th to November the 21st, it all comes down to this. Tickets are on sale now and going fast. So get to ticketpros.co.za, any Postnet outlet or stadium ticket office. You can also call 087 151 4400 to be part of the action. For more info, visit cricket.co.za.
Talk Radio 702-567 Cape Talk. In studio, we have our special guests. We have Dr. Cherie Daly and Louis Rehrl, and we're talking about stem cells, stem cell research, storage of stem cells. They both work for a company called Cryo-Save, and asking for your calls. Any questions you have about stem cells, the research, the application, the storage, the cost, give us a call. 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567, or you can SMS on 31702. 702 or 31567. Just before we go back to the lines, I don't know who wants to answer this question. Maybe Louis, what are the practical usages at the moment of stem cells? One hears the theory about all these things it can do. Right now, what are the uses of stem cells?
It's one of the most important questions that people have to ask about this when they're considering this for their child, because there's a lot of hype and we have to separate the hype from the hope. The current applications...
Separate the hype. I love that. Separate the hype from the hope. Yeah. Okay.
So there's the current treatable diseases today. There's around 70. These are mainly the blood type disorders. We're talking about leukemia and lymphoma, sickle cell anemias, those type of things, immune system disorders that all originate in the bone marrow. Now, these may remain quite rare today, but that's realistic. That's where we are today. The future is really what's exciting stuff, and that's where most people are hearing about this stuff. What can we do? What can we grow? What can we cure? And so on. So it's important to know that today you might have to make a decision that we look at as a bit of an insurance policy should your child get a leukemia, but then it's also got something in mind for the future. Like in 10 years' time, when all these clinical trials that are currently underway, when they come through, what are we going to be able to do with this stuff?
In the future, would it be to grow a finger, to be able to see again, to be able to hear again? Or is it pretty much unlimited?
I wouldn't say it's unlimited, because this is not the magic bullet for every disease. I think there are certain things that holds really great promise for. For instance, to give you an example, there's some clinical trials looking at these stem cells from the umbilical cord to treat children with cerebral palsy, with hearing disorders that you mentioned earlier, for traumatic brain injuries. So a child's been involved in a near drowning or in a motor car accident, and these children now have brain damage. Can we use these stem cells to treat these children?
Cancer, HIV?
HIV is an interesting one, yes. Absolutely. There's been some work done in Germany with treating of HIV, and cancer is actually a current application now for children with brain tumors. We had a transplant releasing one of our samples for a child with a type of brain disorder that has been treated.
Let's go back to the line. Sue in Northcliffe. Hello, Sue.
Hi there. Good morning. I'd like to ask Dr. Cherie, please. I'm at the moment on a dietary supplement called Stem Enhance, and the basic of the Stem Enhance apparently is bone marrow, bone marrow, and an ingredient called AFA, A-F-A. It's an abbreviation of a heck of a long name here. I can't pronounce it. And they say if you take 2 a day, it builds up your internal systems, your liver, your kidneys, etc., etc. But what I'd really like to find out is the bone marrow that they use in this thing as a supplement. Does that have a blood content?
Okay, so there are companies that are looking at taking stem cells from one donor, so say one adult donor, and they claim to take stem cells, the stem cells that don't carry the tissue matching, what we call the HLA. So that
Sorry, Sue, can I just interrupt? There's a bad noise on your line. Do you want to listen on the radio?
I've been told to switch off the radio.
Oh, all right. Well, while you're on the phone, yes. All right. Okay, that's fine. Go.
Okay, so they claim to take these stem cells from one donor and make an off-the-shelf product like the one you are taking. I can't comment on this company or this product because I don't know it. What I do say is that these kind of things need to be carefully controlled, and you need to ensure that this is be improved by something like the FDA, and that these kind of treatments have gone down the normal route that medicines have to go down with regards to the clinical trials to be able to be approved therapy. So these kind of things I would discuss with your doctor, and to see that these have been approved and gone down the necessary regulatory line.
But the basic thing, Dr. Cherie, what I'm after is the bone marrow. Is this a blood content? This is what I want to find out, basically.
It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they've taken the stem cells cells out of the bone marrow. So normally what they do is they process it. So they spin it down, take out the blood cells, the red blood cells, the plasma, and capture the actual stem cells out of them. And they use these to make off-the-shelf products.
All right, Sue.
All right, fine. Thank you very much for your help.
So much for the call. That is Sue in Northcliffe. What do they actually do with the cells in terms of 15 years down the line? Do they inject? Is it a blood that they inject into the veins? Is that how it gets reintroduced?
It's not a blood, but the stem cells get reintroduced in most therapies IV, intravenously. So it's injected. However, there's, for instance, clinical trials going on looking at spinal cord injuries when they inject it into the site of injury, so directly into the spinal cord where they want the stem cells to work. But a lot of the therapies for current applications today are given intravenously, just like a bone marrow transplant for blood and blood disorders.
Okay, now stem cells are obtainable or harvested from bone marrow. You actually go into the bone. Do you drill into the bone? How do you extract them?
You don't drill into the bone, but with a big needle, you go into the bone marrow, the hip, into what we call the iliac crest.
Right.
So it's not without its complications or risks, and painful. Apparently, I haven't had it done yet. And the patient has to be under general anesthetic to obtain the bone marrow stem cell.
Is it an outpatient sort of application?
It can be a day surgery where the patient would come in and go in under general anesthetic, get the bone marrow aspirated, and could go home on the same day.
Okay. Let's take some SMSs. How about patients who suffer from diabetes mellitus? Can there be total cure?
I wish there could be total cure. There's a lot of research going on with type 1 and type 2 diabetes, looking at how potentially stem cells can help this disease. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes are extremely different diseases, although they have the same name. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder, and type 2 diabetes is not. So the therapy for this and the ongoing research is still in early days, but hopefully this can actually help diabetes one day, or at least improve the quality of life or the complications with diabetes.
Jill via SMS wants to know, will there ever be help for arthritis? And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, yes, it could well happen in the future.
Again, arthritis, there's some clinical trials going on.
Yes.
So, these things, like any pharmaceutical drug, need time and need the correct way of going through all the necessary steps before we can say that this is a treatment.
Now, we're talking about adult to child stem cells. You store it for your child because of some future problem the child might have. I've got a question here. Is stem cell research strictly for the child, or can the parents use it? Can it go the other way?
The parents could use the baby stem cells if they were tissue matched, if they were a perfect match for them for current applications. And there has been some case of a father having leukemia and using his baby stem cells. The problem with adults receiving stem cells is the amount of stem cells we can get from the umbilical cord blood is often enough to just treat a pediatric child for the current blood disorders. And this, we need to often, if the sample's not large enough, supplement it with either bone marrow. There's studies going on to use 2 cord bloods, or to make more of what we have in the laboratory. So these are current applications that are looking at making more for adult transplants from umbilical cord blood.
But Louis, you don't have to use sibling or parent or any cells. You can actually use cells from some third party, can't you? Yeah. As long as what?
As long as there's a tissue match. So when you do a search, if, for instance, most people today haven't stored their child's cord blood.
Yes.
So the route that you'd have to take, should you require a stem cell transplant, is to do an application on a public registry worldwide. This can be incredibly expensive, and there's no guaranteed matches. So let's imagine now that you do a search and you get a match. The important thing is that it's a perfect match. Using your child's stem cells or your baby's stem cells for a sibling, the matching criteria is actually far less. we can use a slightly mismatched sample because of the naivety of these cells.
We are now at 26 minutes to 7 o'clock. If you just joined us, a very good morning. We're talking stem cells, stem cell research, storage of stem cells. And in studio, we have our special guest, Dr. Cherie Daly, who is currently involved with stem cells in Europe. She is the head of medical affairs in Europe and Asia for a company called Cryo-Save. And with her in studio, we have Louis Rehrl, who is the CEO of Cryo-Save South Africa. The way that is spelt, by the way, is CRYO-SAVE. And we'll give out the emails and the details later on. CRYO-SAVE. Numbers to dial 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567. Or you could SMS on 31702 or 31567. Just before we go back to the lines, before we went to the news break, Louis, we were talking about using not family stem cells, but outside stem cells. So you were saying as long as there's a tissue match, you can use it. Is that something that people are using more often than simply than using a family-related stem cell?
Well, actually, that's on the decline because the chances of finding that match if you don't have your own stem cells stored is quoted to be around 1 in 100,000. So it's quite difficult to find a match. The benefits of using a cord blood stem cell transplant is actually a bit better for a few reasons, and that is because they're a more naive stem cells, so they don't react to the normal rejection things that you would have when you transplant a bone marrow stem cell into a body. So they in America especially, they're now being seen as the preferred source for stem cells.
All right, and if you can answer this question in just a minute, Cherie, what actually happens to these stem cells that you take from a third party, as long as there's a tissue match? What do they do? Do they mutate? Do they change their what do they actually happens to them?
When we're using them for the current applications like the blood disorders, what we want them to do is go to the bone marrow and start forming all the red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets in the bone marrow. So for the blood stem cells, this is what we want them to do. For other conditions and other types of stem cells that we use in therapy today, besides stem cells only found in the umbilical cord blood, they either work directly or what we call indirectly by stimulating the body with growth factors, with the natural stem cells in our body to help build and repair the damaged tissues or organs.
Okay, just before we talk to Maria, we're going to be doing that next, and then after that, Richard, the question about manufacturing artificially growing stem cells. How do you... That's a life form. How do you grow those?
So stem cells have been grown in the laboratory, and there are teams of researchers that have grown mini livers in the laboratory and cells and tissues to form this and doing research on this. Some work doing, instead of testing pharmaceutical drugs on animals, can we test them on mini livers that we grow in the lab? One day, can we perhaps transplant these? I'll give you an example of a lady with a damaged esophagus, a trachea. So that's your windpipe. And she had this damaged windpipe. She received a windpipe from a cadaver. It was stripped of all its natural stem cells. They took stem cells out of her bone marrow from her hip, and they took these stem cells called mesenchymal stem cells. They put them on the cadaver trachea, on the cadaver windpipe, and they transplanted the part of the windpipe back into this lady. This was done in Spain. So now she has an organ that is not her own, but it has her own cells growing on it. So there's no body rejection. Like when you are when you have a heart transplant or a liver transplant and your body rejects it. And this is where we are going to today.
There must be some serious ethical considerations where people are holding up their hands and saying, you can't do this.
Well, this is her own stem cells. So you would be using a synthetic windpipe, a donated windpipe like anyone, but you're removing the cells that your body would normally reject, and then you're taking your own cells.
Right. Maria, thank you for holding in Northcliffe. Hi.
No problem. Good morning, Errol. Good morning to both doctors. I am an independent agent for StemTech, what is developed, and the founder is Dr. Drapeau, what is a stem cell researcher and also a neurophysiologist. Now, I take it myself for 3 years with great success, and what it does, it only releases and enhances the release of your own adult stem cells out of your bone marrow in the blood circulation, what enhances then everything what has to be repaired, restored, or renewed. And with 2 capsules, it releases between 2.5 and 4 million stem cells within the first hour. He has done all the proofs. It has an EPI code, it has an MCC code, and it goes worldwide now with the success this doctor has. That is the only thing I can say, and I can highly recommend it. We can't say it's true. It's a natural supplement.
All right, Maria. We're just running out of time. Let Louis make a comment on that.
Maria, my question is, what is the application for this? Is this just to keep you well? I mean, we can't treat the leukemia with these tablets.
No. We don't say it can't you. We're not allowed to, but it enhances your overall well-being. And I have tremendous good success with all kinds of people what has ailments and said we're feeling so much better. And we're doing well, and you can see progress. We have heart patients. We have also scientifically proof what Dr. Drapeau has done with heart patients here.
All right.
It is really very successful. And as I say, if I can do it a natural way until the time that I need it in another way, then so be it,
Right. Thank you very much for the call, Maria. Richard in Stellenbosch. Thanks for holding. Morning, Richard.
Good morning.
Hi.
My question is, we've got blood stem cells circulating in our blood system. Do we lose anything by donating blood?
No, you won't lose anything by donating blood, and I think donating blood is an excellent thing to do, so I encourage you all to donate blood. And you won't lose. Your stem cells will replace what you do lose, and there is no problem with that.
Cool.
Thanks very much for the call, Richard. What do these things look like? What do stem cells look like? I mean, are they microscopic? Are they?
They're microscopic cells that you can see under a microscope.
So a little petri dish, they'd wriggle around and...
Yes.
Okay. Felix in Velddacht. Where's that, Felix? Felix? Hello?
Hello?
Felix, yes. I was asking, where is Velddacht?
Welgedacht.
Oh, is it Welgedacht? Oh, sorry, it's the wrong spelling. Yes, go ahead. Morning to you.
Good morning. I got a question if stem cells would assist with scleroderma.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, scleroderma is not a current application, but there is a clinical trial running in Europe and in the United States, and the initial results are looking promising. We don't have all the answers, but together with a group of autoimmune disorders, this disease is being looked at to be treated with stem cells.
All right, Felix, thanks very much for the call. Richard in Stellenbosch, we're coming to you next, but Michael's been waiting for a while. Hi, Michael.
Good morning.
Morning.
I have a very brief question. My daughter believes in this saving the core blood or the core cells. She paid her money, and she had a baby about 8 months ago. But unfortunately, the birth took a bit of time, and she had to have a cesarean. And the obstetrician involved didn't believe in it and made quite a fuss about collecting the cells. In fact, he refused to do it. And it ended up with quite a big argument in the hospital. And eventually one of the sisters in the theater did it. So she actually got it all right. But what I wanted to my question very briefly is, it's her blood, and she decided she wanted to keep it for future. And can the hospital actually refuse to collect it?
That's a very interesting point. Yes, both wanted. Yes, Louis, give us a comment.
Look, it is difficult to give official comment without knowing, both sides of the story. But to answer the question, it's the patient's right to elect to do this or not, and it's also their choice as to which company they choose. So whichever facility they go to, they're entitled to have this done.
Actually, they did use your company, and she did pay for for the cord blood to be stored in Antwerp or wherever it is in Europe. So she paid her whatever it was, 20,000 rand, and she signed the contract. She did everything, and then the obstetrician refused.
Well, it begs the question, it is the patient's right, is that correct, to decide whether or not, as Michael is saying, does the doctor have any right at all to do the refusal, like Michael was saying?
Absolutely. Remember, our number one priority
He's saying he does have a right?
Absolutely. The number one thing is that the safety of the mother and the baby. So if there's a complication, and he has to take care of that, we fully support that. We are not putting anybody at risk to do this collection. That's our first priority. So if mother's in distress, it's his choice. The doctor's in charge.
Perhaps this was the situation with you, Michael.
Well, I don't know, because eventually one of the sisters collected the blood and everything worked out correctly. But there was a bit of an argument before it all happened.
If I can take it one step further, just to give you an indication, in America now, in 27 states, it's legislation that the doctor has to inform the mother of cord blood banking.
I'm sorry, that's what it's called, cord blood banking.
Cord blood. C-O-R-D, cord blood.
Oh,
yeah?
Cord.
Well, as in umbilical cord.
If I can just add, I think this is something that perhaps should be discussed with the doctor prior to delivery to avoid any confusions like this. So everyone understands, and the patient understands that if there's a complication, the doctor might not be able to.
Well, unfortunately, it wasn't possible because everything was going very normal, and then it was just delayed, and it was the doctor was the standby called out in the middle of the night, and there were a few bits and pieces that went wrong.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Mike. But yeah, you make a good point. I mean, one needs to maybe have a contract about this before any birth, if this is the way you want to go.
Absolutely, there is a contract that the parent has to sign, and that the doctor's not held liable if the doctor cannot collect the cord blood, because for different circumstances the cord blood
or
can't.
Controversy, if he does collect them and something goes wrong after that, then no blame can be apportioned.
No liability.
John, good morning. Thanks for calling.
Good morning, and Errol, and to your guests, and thanks for taking my call. I just have a quick question. Would it be possible for this type of treatment to be administered to a child suffering with autism? And what would the result be? Is it possible, first off?
There's no current application for stem cells for autism. There are other neurological disorders that have been treated using stem cells. So this is not something that right now I would recommend for autism.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the answer. I appreciate it.
Right, thanks very much for the call, John. All right, taking your calls 011-883-0702 or 021-446-0567, or you can SMS on 31702 or 31567. Interesting. Lots of questions about will it cure this or will it cure that? And we can't take all of those, but your answer would be, if we put those questions up, we don't know yet what cures can be affected through stem cell.
We do know for the blood and blood diseases, the cancers, we know about 70 different diseases that it's currently treatable. And then, as I said, there's a host of diseases that are in clinical trials, which we can't claim until we have the results whether it can or can't treat these diseases.
Can you harvest and store your own stem cells?
Yes, today as an adult, you could harvest your stem cells from your bone marrow or your fat tissue, and you could store this. Actually, as a company, we store stem cells from adipose tissue. So we can take stem cells from a sample of fat tissue and take out the stem cells and store this. So we can get them.
All right. Now, why would I do that? As to hand down to my kids?
Well, as we age in disease, so do our...
Or for my own use?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, as we age in disease, so do our stem cells age in disease. They're part of who we are. So we believe in the younger the better. This is why umbilical cord blood, umbilical cord tissue. As an adult, perhaps if you are now young and healthy and you have a family history of diseases, perhaps you want to store your adult stem cells for later on in life. This is an opportunity that you can avail of.
And I would do that then, not knowing necessarily what the future holds and what cures may be effective.
Absolutely.
In 15 or 20 years' time, I might need my hearing to be repaired or whatever, and by that stage, the stem cells might be doing that.
And your word "might" is a quite a strong word. Yes, a lot of the thins is not current applications, but might be in the future.
Okay. So this is from Billy. He says, Billy Biltong, he calls himself. I know the banks are always looking for the last drop of blood, but this is going a bit far. Back after this. All right, we have a few minutes left with our guest in studio talking about stem cells. Fiona, we're going to be talking to you right now, but just let me ask before we do that, embryonic stem cells are cells taken from, obviously, from the embryo, and we were talking earlier about possible hazards, interference with the embryo and with fetal deaths and so on. Why does one want to harvest those cells as opposed to baby cells?
Okay, so as I explained in the beginning, stem cells are the building blocks of our life. So the embryonic stem cells have the potential to divide into all the tissues in our body because they were the start of the human being, of the baby developing in the womb, so that they believe they have a greater potential. And as the stem cells differentiate, they take down their certain path to form a nerve tissue or a blood tissue or skin tissue, and they then have less potential to divide into all the tissues in the body.
Okay. Fiona, thanks for holding. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Interesting question. Go ahead.
The doctor just now said that a pediatrician or whoever has the right to say no, they're not harvesting stem cells. Now, because the baby might be affected or the baby's not well when it's born or something like that, do they cut the umbilical cord to this baby? Okay. And if so, what side is the stem cell taken from? Is it taken from the baby side or is it taken from the placental side?
Okay, thanks, Fiona. A very relevant question and something I'd really like to clarify. When the baby is born, the umbilical cord is clamped and cut, and the baby is actually removed from the mother to the father or the pediatrician. Now, normally, while the placenta is still in the mother's womb, the blood is taken from the umbilical cord, so it's from the placental side. There is no interfering with the baby or child, and the mother and child are the priority at birth. So there's no risk to the mother or child.
Fiona, if I could just add, it's important to remember that we're harvesting a product here that would be traditionally thrown away. This is a waste product that we're saving for the future, and it's not painful or harmful to either mother or child.
But then why did doctors say that the pediatrician has the right to not take it because it may affect the child? That's what was said just now, if I'm not wrong.
It won't affect the child. It can't affect the child, the taking of the cord blood. It might interfere with the obstetrics in the theatre for perhaps if it's a cesarean section and the mother's bleeding a lot. But then we do have alternatives of delivering the placenta and a midwife or someone else dealing with the collection because the physician needs to treat the mother.
All right, Fiona, thank you very much. Interesting call. Thanks very much for that. Some SMSs. I have had bilateral mastectomy. Can I harvest and store my stem cells? That's from Gaynor.
Okay, so we call this fat transfer. Physicians today, plastic surgeons around the world for years have been taking fat from one side of the body and putting it into another site. So taking some fat from the leg or abdomen and putting it into the breast. So plastic surgeons are doing that today, and they are enhancing these sometimes with patients' own stem cells to help with the blood supply to this fat tissue.
Somebody says, seriously, this is only for the very wealthy. The rest of us will just have to take our chances. Well, what's your comment on that? It is. I mean, 20,000 Rand is beyond the means of many, many people.
Yeah, I heard 20,000 being mentioned. It's actually 12,800. Now, this is important to remember. It's not for everybody. You know, we might be speaking to young families here that are having to buy prams and cots and all those things, and we realize it, and it's not within everybody's means. We have tried to make it more accessible to people with 12 and 24-month payment options, which can significantly reduce that, you know. But, you know, what we need to look at is the potential for needing these stem cells in the future. And if you don't have yours stored, what are your alternatives? And this is what you would be left with if you didn't. And this is where you and I are today. We don't have our own stem cells stored. The treatment of finding a donor stem cell abroad I could quote some figures, but we're running into hundreds of thousands, $35,000 to do a search for a public match. Now we're getting expensive. Prams out there can be 25,000 rand. So it's about the correct perspective. We want people to be comfortable. We don't want them to be in financial distress because they're trying to do this for their child. So it's not for everybody.
All right. Now, Cryo-Save, your company is a privately owned organization, no?
No, it's a listed company.
All right, it's a listed company as opposed to a public bank. Now, we don't have any public banks in this country, but presumably in Europe you do, or in the US or wherever.
Yes.
What does it cost for a public bank? How does that work then?
Okay,
Is it funded by the state?
It's funded by the state.
So it costs very little
to donate,
or nothing?
it costs nothing. But if you want to sample off a public bank, it can cost you anything from $25,000 to $35,000 in the state, or about 20,000 euros in Europe. So it costs nothing to donate to a public bank, and public banks are wonderful, and I encourage any mother delivering in a country where public banks are available to, if they don't want to store it privately, to donate and to be listed on an international donor registry.
If I understand you, somebody from here who donates to a bank in Europe, that person's offspring may in 20 years' time need those cells. Would they be able to go onto this registry and actually get those particular cells from his or her mother?
If they were still there, they could get them.
Yes.
However, we don't need to, when it's listed on a public bank, you don't need to contact the donor to ask them if you can release it. So you donate it. So anyone can then use it if they search the registries and find it without getting permission from the person that's donated it.
They're still getting a lot of calls about could the stem cells cure this and that, spinal cord damage and macular degeneration. Again, the answer is we don't know.
Spinal cord is currently being done in a clinical trial in Hong Kong, where they're injecting stem cells from the umbilical cord blood that have been matched and found on an international registry into the spinal cord.
Okay. Just in the last minute or two, what are the laws in South Africa governing this sort of operation?
Currently, there's a bit of a legislation vacuum surrounding stem cell and cord blood banking. We have a hand in drafting this legislation at the moment. In the meantime, we align ourselves with the international standards of Europe and America. So, although there's nothing governing us locally, we're fully aligned with what we believe the standards around the world. And in due course, we'll get our legislation up and running. We're just running a few years behind.
Do you in the country see this as a hugely growing industry, or do you see that there are too many restrictions in terms of financial constraints?
Look, there are restrictions, there's financial restraints, there's legislation and so on, and these things aren't going to go away. They're probably only going to get worse, but it is growing worldwide. There's 135 million births around the world annually, and every year the percentage of cord blood banking is going up, and it's just been driven by research and all different institutions that identify the potential for the future.
Okay. And just very quickly in SMS, what is the technique of collection? How soon should it go to the laboratory? Is the technique just an injection, just a drawing out of blood?
It's like drawing of blood with a blood bag. And then how quickly should it get to the laboratory? As quickly as possible, but within 48 hours.
Okay, and this is all done by, who would do it in this country? Would it be your company, or would it be a GP who would do it?
Well, we'll assist the parents with everything with regards to getting the collection kit to them, etc., etc. And in our fees, all of that is covered, doctor fees, etc. The doctor does the actual collection on our behalf, and he gets a procedure fee for that.
Okay. Wow, what an interesting topic. Thank you for being with us in the studio. Let me give out some contact details. The website here, Louis, for the South African Cryo-Save is
www.cryo-save.co.za. But Just put Cryo-Save in Google and you'll find it.
That's CRYO-Save, and you'll find it. Thank you very much. That's Louis Rehrl and Dr. Cherie Daly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for
being in the
inviting
studio.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for being with me this morning. I've enjoyed the last 3 hours, and I hope they found the last hour particularly interesting and fascinating. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend. I'm Errol Ballantyne, and may we continue on the road to retaining our Rugby World Cup. Have a good one. It is now 7:00.